Last August, some 100,000 Muslims gathered in Indonesia's capital, calling for the establishment of an Islamic caliphate. The rally was organized by a radical Islamic group, Hizb ut-Tahrir, which is banned in many countries but rapidly gaining popularity in Indonesia, the world's most populous Islamic nation. The country's moderate Muslims are warning the group's provocative rallying cry could cause national disintegration. I'm Taimur Nabili, and on this edition of 101 East we ask, does radical Islam pose a threat to Indonesia's political stability? Indonesia's leaders have stressed religious tolerance as the nation's guiding principle since independence in 1945. But now, radical Islamic groups like the Islamic Defenders Front and Hizb ut-Tahrir reject the political mix as inadequate for fighting persistent social ills like corruption and poverty. They say the Quran should be the sole source of political and legal legitimacy. Hal Davis reports now on how much social traction these groups are gaining in Indonesia.
Jadi begini, untuk pelatihan itu kita
the training teaches them to physically defend themselves so they can prepare to become soldiers.
Kemudian yang jelas untuk defense.
It's in line with the Prophet's teachings, so we don't go looking for enemies. But if they are there in front of us, it's only right we have the physical strength to defend ourselves because we are obliged to do so.
These men are from the Islamic Defenders Front. They're training in a poor district in the Indonesian capital, Jakarta. The front's members may say they don't go looking for trouble, but they're happy to take the law into their own hands, closing and smashing up bars, brothels and gambling dens.
Itu masih buka, itu kita kasih.
If they are open, we initially give them written warnings and so on. And if they still don't close down, then we will have to go down there and forcibly close them.
Menutup secara paksa. Resikonya kita akan berhadapan dengan polisi.
The front is perhaps best known for its attack on the offices of the Indonesian version of Playboy. That gained it international attention and did much to raise the IDF's profile in Indonesia itself. So in a country of 222 million, with between 80 and 90% of the population Muslim, how worried is the government by the rise of groups like the front? Senior officials we spoke to said the vast majority of Indonesians remain opposed to less tolerant forms of Islam, but there are still grounds for concern.
The radical groups are very small in number, but they are very noisy too. We saw some instances like the Bali bombing was the result of some radical ideas. So we have to be worried all the time about this.
For many, it's images like these, from the Bali bombings in 2002, that continue to stoke their fears about Indonesian radicalism. The Bali attack was carried out by Jazeera English, but a senior former member of JI who fought in Afghanistan and with radical groups in the Philippines argues that Bali was an aberration.
The culture of Muslim people is a peace Muslim community. It was disliked like Afghanistan. I was still 6 years in Afghanistan, and I look by my own eyes the culture of Afghanistan. Yeah, so they hard. Their culture is hard. Yeah, since long time ago, they embrace Islam also by fighting, by war. Different in Indonesia, they embrace Islam in peaceful.
That impression of the moderate nature of Indonesian Islam is backed up by the rituals and customs carried out in south-central Java. Here, the inhabitants of this small village see no conflict between their Islamic faith and the offerings they make to the spirits of the fields to ensure a good harvest.
I consider myself a good Muslim because all these rituals are just another way of worshipping. The rice goddess is called Devi Sri. This rice sheaf here you can take home with you and your blessings will multiply. You can also cook and eat it. The various objects we used in the ceremony just now, all of them we give it to the goddess, who has the power over the fields in this area.
It's a comforting picture of a tolerant, easygoing culture, hard to imagine in some states with a stricter interpretation of Islam. But there are fringe organisations that continue to attack institutions they see as anti-Islamic. This church near Bandung, West Java, has been repeatedly attacked over the past few years. In the worst of these assaults, all its contents were destroyed by the anti-apostasy lines, with graffiti left on the walls threatening to tear down the whole building. According to the AAA, the number of converts to Christianity in the area is increasing, something its leader finds deeply troubling.
Conversions to Christianity in Indonesia, especially in Bandung and Jawa Barat, have become increasingly serious. In my judgment, I think it is a bigger evil than terrorism.
For Yeni Wahid, the daughter of a former president and herself a rising politician, it's a serious mistake to see such comments and such actions as representative of Indonesian Islam.
We disagree totally with the violence carried out in the name of Islam. But there's also the issue of injustice that needs to be addressed, especially in the geopolitical arena. And unless this is being addressed, then there will be no meeting point between, Western thinking and Islamic thinking. You have to address this issue first, in my opinion.
So while the general picture of a tolerant country is true of Indonesia, there remain dangers. A small minority, especially if angered by what they see as Western aggression, could possibly still resort to violence and extremism.
Now, to discuss the future role of Islam in Indonesia, I'm joined by Mirza Satriawan, a leading member of Hizb ut-Tahrir Indonesia, the organisers of that big rally back in August. Also, Sydney Jones, an Indonesia expert with the International Crisis Group. And from Jakarta, we have Yeni Wahid, who's the Secretary-General of Indonesia's National Awakening Party, which was founded by her father, Abdul Rahman Wahid, who led Indonesia's largest Muslim organisation, the NU, before becoming the country's fourth president. And you saw her in that short film a moment ago. Yeni Wahid, let me begin with you, if I might. What is the correct picture of Indonesia? A tolerant Muslim state or a hotbed of potential radicalism?
A tolerant Muslim state, but of course with outbursts of radicalism here and there. But overall, we are a tolerant society.
But the fear is that that radicalism is growing and growing fast and may well turn into something altogether more scary.
Like in the video showing before, that these radicals, they are small, but they're very noisy. Therefore, it seems like they have big supporters, but that's not the case at all.
And your experience, Sydney Jones, of having lived and studied Indonesian Islam for a very long time?
I think Yeni's right that it's a tolerant society, but I believe that even though the radicals who use violence are a very small fringe element, that Indonesia as a whole is growing more conservative, and that also there are forces that are politically powerful that are moving Indonesia to a less tolerant kind of Islam. And I would say paramount among those groups is the Indonesian Ulama Council, or the MUI, which is powerful and even has members within Yeni's own moderate NU organization that are taking an increasingly hard line.
Mirza Satriawan, you're a proponent of a greater degree of Islam, a stronger Islam, to govern Indonesia, but does it surprise you that so many people fear that?
Well, I think many people, I mean Indonesian people, the Muslim, they don't know really about the correct or the clear Islam. I mean, and when you say about the tolerant Muslim, it depends whether it's tolerant meaning that they have to accept the Western value. Of course, they don't want to accept all the things from Western.
We're not talking about accepting Western values here. We're talking about a spectrum within the Islamic faith itself.
Okay, actually, no majority of the Muslim group will not condone such action, which is too radical, meaning extremist or terrorist act like that. I mean,
but your vision of Indonesia is one in which Islamic faith is actually the key touchstone of the political system.
Yes,
the secular system that Indonesia has now ceases to exist.
Yes, yes. We believe that there are a lot of problems in Indonesia, and this because of the implementation of the secular law and the secular democratic capitalistic system in Indonesia has caused a lot of problems, a lot of misery with, to the people, and we think that, we believe that Sharia law is the one that will alleviate all these problems.
I would disagree with Mirza. I think that, I mean, in some areas in Indonesia, we have seen local regions playing with Sharia-inspired local laws, and the main victims of that law usually is women.
We'll address the issue of women in particular in just a moment. We'll take a short break and come back and consider that as one of the talking points. We'll continue our discussion after the break and hear from one well-known Indonesian woman, a model whose near-naked art displays prompted threats from Islamic protesters. Stay with us.